Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. We've got 2 horse centers left until the Belmont Stakes. The field is starting to take shape, but you know what, Brian? Why don't we look back at some of the historic Belmont Stakes when the Triple Crown was on the line? Because I think fans can learn a lot about what to expect this year, maybe.
That sounds good, Matt. Belmont Stakes, June 9. We're only 11 days away. It's going to be a great card, by the way, Matt. Plenty of huge races. But yeah, let's do what you said. Let's go back, look at some of the Triple Crowns and Triple Crown attempts over the last, 40 years or so. Now, we start 40 years ago, Matt, because that was probably the best race I ever saw, frankly. The 1978 Belmont brought together Affirmed and Alydar yet again. They met as a bunch of times as a 2-year-old. They were the top 2 2-year-olds of 1977. Affirmed was dominant on the West Coast early in the season. Alydar was dominant on the East Coast. Alydar was actually the favorite for the Kentucky Derby, but Affirmed easily held him off in the Derby. The Preakness, Alydar got a little bit closer. That set up for a magical 1.5 miles at Belmont Park in 1978. Affirmed and Alydar, Matt, and Affirmed got it done.
Yeah, Brian, and you said 1.5 miles. That this Belmont Stakes, the 1.5 miles, is magical. It is so unique. Affirmed. It was going to be his 8th win in a row, the 9th time that these 2 fantastic horses had met in their young careers already. And it came down to a head finish during the race. Every time Alydar put a challenge in on Affirmed, and that was several different points in the race, heading into the turn, heading into the stretch, deep in the stretch. Every time Alydar put a challenge in, and on some of those he got in front, Affirmed fought back every single time. Affirmed wasn't maybe the flashiest horse in the world, probably less flashy and attractive than Alydar, but boy, Brian, there were not too many horses in the history of racing that were as determined and courageous as that Harbor View colt.
Absolutely. Trained by Las Barrera, Affirmed had the heart of a true champion, a great champion. That Alydar was as talented as they come. Alydar beat Affirmed a few times as a 2-year-old, and I would say that challenge came pretty much the whole race because Alydar picked up Affirmed early on in this Belmont, and he never let Affirmed away. So they battled for well over a mile. Certainly, it looked like Alydar might get his measure in the long Belmont stretch, but Affirmed just came back and proved ever so slightly the best that Belmont Stakes Day. Does Justify have the kind of heart that Affirmed has? Probably not. Few horses have had that kind of heart. But Justify has a lot of things in common with Affirmed in that they're both West Coast horses. They both have really good tactical speed. They can be on the lead or just off the lead and run their race and then just be hard to pass. I'm not ready to put Justify in any kind of Affirmed class yet. Although if he wins a week from Saturday, he will have that special grouping with Affirmed as a Triple Crown winner. So now Affirmed had quite a bit more experience, having raced a lot as a 2-year-old and much more as a 3-year-old than Justify. But in this day and age, Matt, less racing, horses seem to be able to do what they need to do. Justify has some things in common with Affirmed. Do you see any Affirmed in Justify?
Well, like you said, Brian, he's got tactical speed, but and a similar running style. But like you said, Brian, he hasn't faced the same kind of challenges that Affirmed did. Affirmed and all those battles with a horse of the quality of Alydar. That was a unique time, very different time now. There is no way that Justify is going to end up running 29 times in his career and winning 22 races.
That's right, and there's no competition quite like Alydar. Certainly Justify will not have to meet a horse near the quality of Alydar in this Triple Crown. a special year, and it proved to be the last Triple Crown winner for 37 years. Although the very next year, Matt, it sure looked like we'd have a Triple Crown winner. I think a horse that overall was a better horse than Affirmed. Some people might argue that. You might argue that, Matt. But what Spectacular did in his races at 2, 3, and 4 was special. Spectacular Bid had some issues in the 1979 Belmont, a prohibitive favorite. First off, there was the safety pin. Of course, no one knew about the safety pin until after the race. Then there was the fast fractions that the inexperienced jockey of Spectacular Bid, Ronnie Franklin, ran into. And then, of course, there was Coastal. People forget how good a horse Coastal was. Coastal wasn't around in the Derby and the Preakness, but he won the half-brother to Slew of Gold. Slew of Gold became a half-brother to him a little bit later on. But the well-bred half-brother to Slew of Gold won that Peter Pan by 14 lengths. People still didn't think he had a chance against Spectacular Bid, though, Matt.
Yeah, Brian, when people nowadays talk about how, this horse is a lock to win the Triple Crown, or people, the Justified fans are saying this race is going to be no contest, I always go back in my mind to 1979 and Spectacular Bid, who came into the race on a 12 race winning streak. I always go back to 1979 and I say to myself, you know what? If Spectacular Bid could lose the Triple Crown, then any horse could lose the Triple Crown, because heading into that race, he looked invincible. And for whatever reasons it was, whether that safety pin story had anything to do with it, Spectacular Bid faced pressure the entire way around, pressure on both sides. It looked like he handled it. He drew away going around the turn and into the stretch, but whatever it was, the 12 furlongs, he just couldn't hold off the challenge of Coastal and ended up finishing third. So I don't care who you are, and I say it this year with Justified. Justified may win the Triple Crown, but you know what? Nothing's a sure thing when you're talking about the Belmont Stakes.
Right, and Spectacular Bid beat Coastal later that fall. Coastal was a really good horse. One point I want to make about Coastal was he was a horse who seemed to like Belmont Park, and Belmont Park is a little different racing surface, different, obviously, track configuration than a lot of places. Coastal seemed to be a horse who really liked Belmont. Spectacular Bid, of course, really came back badly after the race with the infection to that hoof, the safety pin hoof, and got quite sick after the race. So that probably had something to do with it. And the fractions, the inexperienced jockey, all of it conspired. It looked like 1979 was going to be our fourth Triple Crown winner in a short amount of time. And that was kind of the start of no Triple Crown winners for a long time, Matt. I want to take you 10 years later to a really neat rivalry as well. It was 1989, and it wasn't Affirmed Alydar, but it had a lot of similarities in the East Coast, West Coast feel. Easy Goer was such an impressive horse, but Sunday Silence beat him relatively easily in an off-track at the Kentucky Derby. And then, of course, their Preakness was one of the all-time greats, where they just battled down the entire stretch, nose and nose. Sunday Silence got that one, came into that Belmont with a chance to win the Triple Crown, actually ran a good race in the Belmont, but no one was going to beat Easy Goer on that day, Matt.
That's for sure, Brian. It was Easy Goer, the New York horse, back on his home track at Belmont Park. And like you said, Brian, the Belmont Park is different than any other track with its 1.5 mile configuration, its deepness, its really sandy surface, and all the pieces came together for Easy Goer in there, and he just blew Sunday Silence away coming down the stretch, drawing away to win by 8 lengths in there. And Sunday Silence, went on to win 9 races in a 14-race career, a little less, little more lightly raced than Spectacular Bid and Affirmed, but a terrific rivalry, and it turned around, and we'll see that similar kind of rivalry on a couple more Belmonts that we're going to talk about with the tables turning in New York.
Absolutely, and I think Matt pointed this rivalry. Now, Sunday Silence was able to beat Easygoer Churchill Downs, Pimlico, and then later for the Breeders' Cup Classic at Gulfstream Park. All of those races, though, were 1.25 miles or shorter, while the Belmont, I think the distance certainly played a part of this. The 1.5 miles was certainly to the benefit of Easygoer that day, and probably would have been if they raced at other places as well. So the 1.5 miles of the Belmont, the unique distance of the Belmont, was a big part of 1989. I don't think Sunday Silence would have beaten Easygoer that day at 1.25 miles at Belmont Park, but 1.5 miles certainly made it a little bit more lopsided in the favor of Easygoer. Let's move forward, Matt, about 8 years, and we're going to start the Bob Baffert Triple Crown story. Now, in 1996, he brought a horse, not a big name to the Kentucky Derby, Cavanier. And Cavanier looked like a winner until the last few strides when Grindstone went by him. I wondered at the time, is this young trainer Bob Baffert going to get any more chances? Cavanier came so very close to winning the Kentucky Derby. As we found out the very next year, Baffert would be the most dominant Triple Crown trainer for the next 3 decades. And it started with Silver Charm, a very nice California horse, but there were a lot of good horses in that crop, Matt. He had trouble with Captain Bodgett in the Kentucky Derby. Freehouse gave him all he wanted in the Preakness, but he survived both of those battles only to get to the 1997 Belmont. He had to deal again with Freehouse a little earlier in the race, and then the talent of Touch Gold later in the race.
Yeah, like you said, Brian, 2 tough races, different challengers along the Triple Crown Trail in the Derby and then in the Preakness. And then in the 1.5 miles in the Belmont Stakes, Silver Charm, again, most of the way around, especially in the final 6 furlongs. Silver Charm had challenges all the way around, and coming down the stretch, got on the lead and just couldn't hold off Touch Gold. It didn't look like the Touch Gold was going to get there either, but Touch Gold managed to rally up on the outside and get the victory by 3/4 of a length.
Right. 1.5 miles certainly played a part in this one. Touch Gold actually was right there on the pace early, then dropped a little back. Silver Charm had to battle a little bit with Freehouse, put Freehouse away in mid-stretch, and then Touch Gold just kicked it in late to go by. Baffert's first Kentucky Derby winner, came back to win the Preakness, and then ran a really big Belmont, only to fall short the final 16th of a mile, as Matt says. So a big Triple Crown performance from Baffert and Silver Charm, just to fall short late in the Belmont. 1 year later, he came back. He came back with a couple 3-year-olds to the Kentucky Derby. Indian Charlie was the lightly raced hotshot. Real Quiet was a much more experienced horse, but Real Quiet was getting better, and Real Quiet was a true distance horse. And Real Quiet was able to beat a Canadian bred, Victory Gallop, coming from Maryland and Arkansas. Victory Gallop, the Arkansas Derby winner, was a good second to Real Quiet in the Derby. In the Preakness, Real Quiet actually beat Victory Gallop, who was second again, a little bit easier. And then the Belmont, talk about Baffert coming close. This was about as close as you can come without winning the Triple Crown, Matt.
It sure was. And like you were saying about Real Quiet, who was a horse that wasn't a really good-looking horse. He wasn't a physical specimen by any means. Owned by Mike Pegram, so it was really our first exposure to Mike Pegram, who we would see so many times over the years partnering with Baffert. Like you said, Brian, he wasn't the favorite in the Derby. He won the Derby. He wasn't the favorite in the Preakness either, Brian, which is unusual after you win the Derby. And he won the Preakness. And it sure looked like in the Belmont Stakes, he drew away. It sure looked like we had a Triple Crown winner that year. But there came Victory Gallop, turned the tables, and it was so close at the wire. And interesting, we should get the historic tie into this year's Kentucky Derby that the trainer of Victory Gallop was, of course, the one and only Elliott Walden, who is the CEO and the racing mastermind of WinStar, the owners of Justify.
Yeah, a little interesting, a little ironic there, Matt. Walden ended Real Quiet's run, Bob Baffert and Real Quiet's run back in 1998, and now 20 years later, he's on the other side, hoping to get Justify home in all three. Again, I think distance played a part in this. Certainly, you might say that Kent Desormeaux moved a little bit too hard too early on Real Quiet. He really did open up. Usually, Belmonts are won by the time they straighten out, but we're seeing with a lot of these Triple Crown attempts, Spectacular Bid, Sunday Silence, Silver Charm, now Real Quiet, and more of the horses we're going to talk about. The Kentucky Derby and the Preakness winner looked good at some point during the race, and most of them looked good at the head of the stretch. But that last quarter mile of the 1.5 mile Belmont got to him, and that's what happened really late to Real Quiet. Victory Gallop, not a fresh horse per se, like some in more recent history, but Victory Gallop, just like Easy Goer, had finished second in both the Derby and the Preakness. I'll go back a year. Touch Gold, by the way, kind of came out late his 3-year-old year, had a sprint race and then the Lexington Stakes. Then he went into the Preakness and ran a very good race in the Preakness. So he missed the Derby, but he was coming off the Preakness when he beat Silver Charm in 1997. 1997, 97, 98, two tough defeats for Bob Baffert as far as the Triple Crown, but clearly Silver Charm and Real Quiet ran big in all three legs. Let's move forward a few years. There are some that we're not talking about today, folks, that did win the Derby and the Preakness, but these are some of the most noteworthy first two legs attempts to get to that Triple Crown. So 2004, of course, everybody remembers. And Smarty Jones has some similarities to Justify as well, Matt, in that Smarty Jones was undefeated, trying to become the first horse other than Seattle Slew to win the Triple Crown while still undefeated. Smarty Jones looked good for a large part of the Belmont, but maybe ran a little too fast early. And who was it that came and got him late, Matt?
Yeah, Brian, I agree about what you're saying with Smarty Jones. Smarty Jones was unbeaten. Smarty Jones came into the Belmont with 9 wins, a 9-race winning streak in his career into the Belmont. And he was a widely popular horse around the country, really had captured the imagination of sports fans and certainly racing fans. There was 120,000 people at least at Belmont Park. And Smarty Jones, again, it was the 1.5 miles. He didn't get things on his own. He had to battle various points in the race heading into the stretch, but he put them away. He won each of those battles, but as the saying goes, he won the battles, but ultimately he didn't win the war. He drew off. He was a good 3 lengths or so ahead heading down to the stretch, but Birdstone, for Nick Zito and for the Whitneys, he was sitting not that far behind. He was sitting in 4th, 5th place, but got rolling down the stretch. And the 1.5 miles got to Smarty Jones for sure. And Birdstone was able to go by and get up by a length.
Yeah, Birdstone made up quite a ground. He wasn't too close to Smarty Jones on that far turn, but on the turn you could see him really picking up horses, and Birdstone just relentlessly ran down Smarty Jones. It was a unpopular last furlong of the 2004 Belmont because people were rooting hard for Smarty Jones that year. Unlike Justify, he's the undefeated horse. He had a little bit more experience than Justify, but also he was more of a people's horse. I think Justify has a lot of wealthy owners. Bob Baffert. I think people connected with Smarty Jones a little bit more because of that reason. As you said, 9 for 9, unlike Justify, who's 5 for 5. Smarty Jones, of course, never ran again after the Belmont, but he did look home free early in the stretch. Birdstone, Matt, was a nice horse. He had won the Champagne as a 2-year-old in the Kentucky Derby. He floundered a little bit. I believe he was 7th in the Kentucky Derby. Kind of the modern story, the more recent story, though, of horses to watch out for in the Belmont. Birdstone, trained by Nick Zito, as you mentioned, ran that mediocre Derby and then skipped the Preakness and then came to the Belmont a fresher horse, and a horse obviously desirous of the 12 furlongs more than Smarty Jones was. So Birdstone ended that run. We're going to flash forward again, Matt, 10 years to California Chrome, in a lot of ways like Smarty Jones. Now, he was even more experienced than Smarty Jones, and he, of course, had lost races as a 2-year-old. But he was on a winning streak himself. He was a people's horse in that he came from kind of a meager background, and trained by a trainer who on a national level wasn't known very well. So he was a horse a lot of people wanted to see that 2014 Belmont.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities in that way between California Chrome and Smarty Jones. Smarty Jones was a Pennsylvania bred, certainly not with fancy breeding. California Chrome, California bred, not fancy breeding. People get attracted to those kind of horses, and for good reason. California Chrome came in with a 6-race winning streak, and again, the Triple Crown is tough. The Derby, the Preakness, nice wins by California Chrome, but coming around the turn into the stretch, California Chrome was making a move, but he just couldn't sustain that move down the stretch and ended up finishing 4th behind Tonalist. Tonalist, who came into the Belmont Stakes off a win in the Peter Pan Stakes. This year, that Peter Pan Stakes winner will be Blended Citizen coming into this year's Belmont. It was Totalist for trainer Christophe Clement. And of course, after the race, there was the famous response by Chrome's owner, Steve Coburn, about the fresh horses coming into the Belmont Stakes that makes it really tough on a horse to win the Triple Crown. Hey, that's still going on. Justify is going to have to face some fresh horses also.
Right, and I think there are, so I'll draw some comparisons between Justify and California Chrome. Certainly California Chrome was raised quite a bit as a 2-year-old and kind of developed into a monster late in the year of his 2-year-old season. But if you look at the form as a 3-year-old for California Chrome, just comparing 3-year-old years of California Chrome to Justify, and even to some extent the Triple Crown a little bit, there's some similarities there, and he certainly had tactical speed as well. Tonalist, maybe you compare him a little bit to Touch Gold, and especially Coastal, in that he was certainly lightly raced. Again, both of those horses had a little bit more experience, especially Coastal had more experience. But Tonalist didn't run in the Derby or the Preakness. He came out of the Peter Pan win like Coastal, and he was a horse well regarded. And we should say that Tonalist went on to do good things. Obviously, a good handicap horse after his win in the Belmont. And remember, Commissioner led a long way, Matt. Tonalist had to get to Commissioner very late in that Belmont. It was kind of a closer finish between several horses, and California Chrome was out of the money, but not all that far off. California Chrome also had a little trouble in the race where he got stepped on. So an excuse maybe similar in a way to Spectacular Bid 25 years or 35 years before. California Chrome went on to a very good career, so we can only hope that we see Justify. I don't know if we'll see Justify a lot as an older horse like we did California Chrome, because of his value and his ownership. But I see some similarities there. California Chrome didn't get it done that day, but in 2015, finally, Matt, and it was Baffert's 4th attempt to win the Triple Crown after the Derby and the Preakness, because we didn't even mention War Emblem, who came to Baffert late and wired the Derby and the Preakness and then really did nothing in the Belmont after a poor start. But in 2015, the stars aligned for American Pharoah, probably Baffert's best horse yet to run in the Triple Crown, and that's saying something. American Pharoah was on a big winning streak as well, dominated the Derby, or actually the Derby was the tough one, but then dominated the Preakness and came to Belmont where maybe Frosted and Keen Ice were his top competition.
Yep, American Pharoah came into the Belmont on a 6-race winning streak. The Belmont would be his 7th win in a row, and of course he would go on to win the Haskell after winning the Triple Crown. But American Pharoah, I'll tell you, Brian, there really wasn't much doubt in my mind during that race and watching the replay, preparing for the show. American Pharoah did everything just right. He got out of the gate smartly. He got a lead. He was able to open up, a nice length or so. He was able to settle into a nice stride, which was something that American Pharoah had a marvelous, marvelous way of doing, and was able to just get a nice steady pace and relax. And coming around the turn, he had plenty left in the tank and opened up, and there was not really much question that coming down the stretch, we finally had our Triple Crown winner.
Right, and interestingly, the horses that ran second and third that day, Frosted and Keen Ice, employed different tactics, or at least Frosted did in the Travers, and that was American Pharoah's only career loss after his debut loss, where Frosted pressured American Pharoah early, and then Keen Ice came and got him late. But in the Belmont, American Pharoah, you said it, American Pharoah was a real racehorse. He knew how to take care of himself and how to do the right things during the race. And that's exactly what we're saying, and what, more importantly, Baffert's saying about Justified. Seems like there's an intelligence, a racing IQ that American Pharoah had that Justified seems to have. He knows not to run too fast. He knows how to utilize his speed to his benefit, but to save energy for later in the race. And a lot of people are hoping that Justified can do the same type of things that American Pharoah did just 3 years ago. Baffert finally breaks through. His fourth Derby and Preakness winner becomes a Triple Crown winner. Justified will be the fifth. American Pharoah, again, I'm not ready to put Justified into the category of American Pharoah, but again, a lot of similarities with Justified to American Pharoah, Baffert being a big one. However, if we look at some of the more recent ones that maybe we're comparing Justified to the most, Smarty Jones, American Pharoah, I will caution you that both Smarty Jones and American Pharoah had the easiest of times in the Preakness. They both won for fun in the Preakness. We know that Justified had to work pretty hard to get that Preakness win a week and a half ago.
Yeah, Brian, it's interesting that you brought up those two races. In thinking about the show and the list of the 8 races that we put out there, I said to myself, which of these races do I see this year's Belmont Stakes possibly being the most like? And I think it's those two, Brian. I could see the outcome of this year's Belmont Stakes being similar to the Smart Jones race, but I could just as well see it being similar to the American Pharoah race. And that's what makes the Belmont Stakes such an interesting and the perfect way to end the Triple Crown.
Right, and we've talked a lot about the mile and a half, the grueling a mile and a half, and Justify hasn't been around for so long and done so much in 3 months. We wonder if the mile and a half will be the thing that got to him. But American Pharoah, again, with a little bit more experience foundation than Justify had, he turned that into the best horse is going to win. It doesn't matter if it's a mile and a half, or 2 miles. So that's exactly what Justify will be hoping to do at the Belmont this year, where the distance really doesn't matter. It's just about the best horse putting away the rest and cruising to victory. Smarty Jones wasn't able to do it. Spectacular Bid wasn't able to do it. We want to see if Justify can do that. Matt, we're going to talk a whole lot more about the Belmont and the horses we think might have some similarities to some of the horses who became Triple Crown spoilers over the years that we just talked about a little bit here next week on HorseCenter. But for this show, we wanted to look and compare Justify a little bit to those horses in the last 4 decades who have made it through the Triple Crown, Affirmed and American Pharoah being the only ones, and those horses that stumbled in the Belmont, because there were a lot of horses between Affirmed and American Pharoah, Matt, that did not get the job done in the Belmont Stakes. So Justify does have his work cut out for him.
Yes, sir, Brian. There were a lot of very, very good horses that couldn't complete the Triple Crown, and Justify is another very, very good horse.
All right, folks, that's our show for today. A week and a half from Belmont Stakes. We're excited about the Belmont. Like I said, we're going to talk about the Belmont field in depth with some betting options we're going to give you next week here on HorseCenter. We're also going to talk about that great Belmont card a lot. So we're going to have a lot of opinions about a wonderful racing card that rivals the Breeders' Cup Belmont Stakes Day at Belmont Park. I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Folks, thank you as always for watching. We do hope, if you haven't already, that you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel right here on Horse Racing Nation. And Matt, we're getting excited about Derby Day Racing, our venture for our meet and greet backstretch. We're going to watch horses work out, and we're going to spend some real quality time at the barn of Buff Bradley, meet the team, see his horses out there. And I think you're coming into Louisville for that, aren't you, sir?
I am. I'm excited about making the trip down. I will see you on Friday. I will see you and Brett on Friday, and we'll head off to Churchill Downs early on Saturday morning and hopefully see some of you folks there. As always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Absolutely. Thank you to Brett. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another HorseCenter. Before we go, Matt, let's do this. Let's trail off with a really big performance by Accelerate as he capped off a Santa Anita handicap and Gold Cup double.
Ready. Racing. And a good line out of the gate. Off the inside, Accelerate is showing very prominently. In fact, leads early from Dr. Door. City of Light between this pair, and Pavel is going to follow Dr. Door across. He's fourth, followed after 2.5 lengths by Prince of Arabia, and then comes Full of Luck. As they approach the finish line the first time, Talamo takes Dr. Door to the front from City of Light, Accelerate, and Pavel in the 3-path. 3 lengths to Prince of Arabia and 2.5 to Full of Luck. Dr. Door is the leader out of the stretch. City of Light striding up within a half length of him. Accelerate tucking in third with 7/8 to go, attended closely by the grey Pavel. 2.5 lengths Prince of Arabia and 3 to Full of Luck. As they make their way past the 6-furlong pole, it's Dr. Door in front, just over a length. City of Light stalking. Accelerate third inside Pavel. 3.5 lengths Prince of Arabia. Full of Luck is now 5 lengths behind him. Coming past the 5/8 pole into the back stretch, and Dr. Door making play from City of Light. Accelerate Pavel, clear of Prince of Arabia, who is 6 lengths off the lead in the middle stages, and in turn 6 ahead of Full of Luck. To the half-mile pole in the Gold Cup at Santa Anita, Dr. Door is showing the way by just over a length to City of Light. Accelerate Pavel. No changes in structure. Prince of Arabia continues to travel solo 5th, and several more lengths to Full of Luck. 3/8 left to go, and it's Dr. Door by a half length. City of Light edging closer. Then Pavel on the outside of Accelerate, who's in a pocket at the 5/16 pole, clear of Prince of Arabia. Full of Luck to the quarter pole. Dr. Door being joined by City of Light. They're a length and a half in front of Accelerate. Espinosa is working him into the clear. Pavel dropping off a little bit fourth at the top of the stretch, and Dr. Door under the whip. City of Light on his outside. Here comes Accelerate. Accelerate moves up sharply at the 8th pole. He's gone straight past them. Accelerate does just that. He has the big cap Gold Cup double at his mercy. Accelerate running right away. Wins by 4 lengths to Dr. Door, who outstayed City of Light. Pavel finished 4th, and they were clear of Prince of Arabia and